Hello, everybody. This is Atman and his spiritual academy, Advaita Atma Yoga Academy. Today, I would like to share with you my understanding, knowledge, and experience, most of all, about self-awareness, which I consider one of the most important subjects related to self-knowledge, our inner transformation and awakening of consciousness, which results to the liberation of any kind of pain and misery. I mean, psychological pain and misery. So, self-awareness is the center. We can say that self-awareness is the center of all spiritual practice and spiritual life. We can also say that self-awareness is a means to disidentify from body, mind, thoughts, emotions, feelings, etc., and the ego itself, or to stop identifying with the body, the mind, and the ego itself, and to experience consciously the peace, plenitude, and fullness and bliss we are as consciousness. Consciousness is our essential nature, our divine self, or simply ourself. But we erroneously identify ourselves with the body, mind, me entity, which is only an instrument of consciousness, a creation, and an appearance of consciousness in consciousness. But due to this fundamental ignorance, that means due to the very fact that we ignore our true self and we identify ourselves with the body, mind, me entity, we live a very limited life. And our life is conditioned by all programming tendencies, patterns, habits that are accumulated in our subconscious mind, and also they are stored in our energy field. So, the way to get out of this limited living is to become self-aware. That means to be aware of ourselves. But since, as I said, our self is consciousness, self-awareness in its fullest meaning means we are aware of our consciousness, of the consciousness we are. I repeat it. Since our self is consciousness itself, self-awareness means that we are aware of the consciousness itself. Usually, psychologists say that self-awareness means to be aware of our thoughts, emotions, feelings, sensations, bodily sensations, energetic sensations. And this is important because by being aware of all these psychological structures, we can manage them and get rid of them. Stop being under their dominion. We live, as I said, under the dominion of unconscious patterns, habits, tendencies. And in order to free ourselves from this dominion, we have to be aware of whatever manifests in our psyche. So psychologists say that this is self-awareness. Of course, we can use self-awareness when we refer to be in the awareness to the awareness of our emotions, feelings, etc. But the true meaning or the fullest meaning of the word self-awareness is to be aware of the silent space of consciousness, which is also experienced as peace and wholeness, plenitude, fullness, freedom, which is an immovable, silent space and changeless, which is always present in all our experiences. The background of all our experiences, psychological experiences and also sensory experiences, is this silent space of consciousness. It is like a screen, like the screen of the cine, of the TV as well, of our mobile. On the screen or in the screen appear all kinds of forms, but the screen itself is changeless. Similarly, this silent space of consciousness, it is the screen, the changeless, ever-present screen in which appear all kinds of experiences. I mean, the psychological experience, thoughts, emotions, sensations, feelings, images, fantasies, ideas, impulses, all these kind of psychological structures appear in this empty, still, changeless, immovable space of consciousness or awareness. And also all kinds of sensory experiences. That means what we see, what we hear, what we touch, what we smell, all these sensory experiences, which are also sensory impressions, appear on the screen or in the screen of this immovable, silent, still changeless space of consciousness. And this space of consciousness, this light of consciousness, is what we are. So self-awareness means that we are aware of this silent space of consciousness, which is always present here and now. It is the now. It is the timeless now. The consciousness we are, it is the timeless now, because there is also a now that is in time. There is past, present, and now. This is the flow of life in the realm of forms. This is the now related to the forms. And there is also the timeless now, beyond time. And this timeless now is our own true self, our divine essence, which is existence, formless existence, without birth and death, and pure consciousness. That means that this existence has the capacity to be conscious of itself. There is no need of another entity or another element in order to be aware of ourselves. But the problem is that we think that as a body, mind, me, we are aware of ourselves. In reality, this capacity to be aware or to be conscious of something belongs to consciousness itself, to our true self. This consciousness reflects on the mind, and through the mind can experience all psychological and all sensory experiences. I repeat, this light of consciousness reflects on our mind, and through the mind can experience all phenomena which are related to the senses and to our psychological self, you could say. That means to thoughts, emotions, feelings, ideas, impulses, desires, anything that appears in our mind, it is also experienced because our mind is has borrowed this light of consciousness. Consciousness reflects on the mind, and the mind, together with consciousness, perceive all kinds of experiences. In reality, more precisely, consciousness itself experiences the forms through the mind. More specifically, consciousness itself experiences itself as forms, because it is consciousness that becomes all these forms, and this body, mind, me as well. And through this body, mind, me instrument, consciousness experiences itself as forms. But when we withdraw our attention and awareness inside us, we draw the attention from external objects, and we draw our attention from the mental, emotional forms, and focus our attention in our center, in the core of our being, then attention fuses, you could say, with consciousness itself, and consciousness experiences itself as pure, silent space, peace, plenitude, bliss, and freedom. So when our consciousness, or when it's not our, but okay, when consciousness operates through our mind, and it is externalized because of the power of rajas, gunas, then consciousness experiences itself as forms. When consciousness returns in itself, then experience itself as pure consciousness, peace, plenitude, bliss, and freedom, without limits, beyond any description. So the true meaning, the complete, the fullest meaning of self-awareness means I am aware of my true self, which is identical with the universal or cosmic consciousness, what we call God, or Brahman, or Tao, or you have given any variety of names to the highest principle and the source of life. God, Brahman. But in reality, what we call Brahman, or God, or spirit, it is formless existence and pure consciousness. And it is also peace, bliss, plenitude, freedom, and love without limits of any kind, limits of any kind. So, when this consciousness reflects on the mind, then it is created this sense I am. This sense I exist, I am, it is created because the consciousness, pure consciousness, reflects on the mind. And this union, apparent, it's not a real union, it is apparent, of consciousness with mind, with the sattvic part of the mind. I want to be more precise. This union of consciousness, reflection of consciousness on the sattvic part of the mind creates this sense I am, I exist. This sense of individuality, that I am an individual entity. And then this sense I am, due to rajas and tamas qualities, identifies itself with the body. So this I am identifies with the body, and because of this, we feel that we are a body, mind, me entity, that we exist as a body. That the existence, this sense of I exist, belongs to the body, which is only an illusion. This feeling or sense, I exist, is created by the union of mind and consciousness. When consciousness reflects itself on the mind, on the sattvic part of the mind, then it is created this sense, I exist, I am. And because of rajas and tamas qualities, or gunas in Sanskrit, this sense I am identifies with the body. So we think that we are as the body, that this sense I exist belongs to the body. And also, this capacity to perceive, to become aware of anything that belongs to the body, mind, me entity. That is a capacity, the capacity to become aware of something. Now you hear me and you see me. And the illusion that is created in us is that we are capable to perceive the form and the sound as a body, mind, me entity. In reality, it is consciousness that has this capacity to become aware of anything. And this consciousness operates through our mind. So we could say also that our mind becomes capable to perceive anything because consciousness reflects on it and gives the mind, borrows to the mind this, gives to the mind the capacity to perceive. But more precise is to say that consciousness perceives through a mind, perceives forms through the mind. And these forms are also creations of consciousness. In reality, it's consciousness itself that appears as all this multitude of forms, as this universe. That's why this universe is only consciousness itself appearing as this universe. So, consciousness is always present in the timeless now. It is the timeless now. And all forms, psychological forms, thoughts, emotions, feelings, etc., and all sensory forms appear in this silent space of consciousness, which is immovable, changeless, ever the same, and is always peaceful, full, whole, and blissful. And nothing can affect or destroy or make any harm to this silent space of consciousness. That's why when we realize that we are this consciousness, then we get rid of all these problems that are created due to identification with the body, which is vulnerable. The body can have many problems. And of course, someday will die. But our essential nature will never die. And never has been born. It's beyond birth and death. Consciousness is beyond birth and death. And so we, as consciousness, we will never die. But due to our identification with the body, we think that one day we are going to die. That's why we live in fear. But when we realize that we are this immortal consciousness, what we call also soul, then we realize that we are immortal. And possibly the fear may continue in us, because fear is energetic contraction. It is a field of energy, and possibly after the awakening, the realization that we are consciousness, this field of fear will continue in us and will reappear according to circumstances. However, we are in the position not to identify with this, and little by little this field of energy will dissolve. Of course, by continuing our practice and by identifying constantly ourselves with this consciousness and our mind as well. I mean that we must keep maintaining our attention and mind inwards and maintain them focused or absorbed in the consciousness, in this silent space of consciousness. By this, little by little, this energetic field of fear and anger as well, and all other egoic tendencies will dissolve. In my journey, I found also a variety of means to accelerate this process of dissolution of these egoic tendencies. For example, I use mantras and prayers to dissolve this energy, and this process of dissolution has been more effective and more quick. So, self-awareness. Self-awareness means that I am aware of this silent space of consciousness, and also this sense I exist. Although this sense I exist, it is the result of the union of consciousness with the sattvic part of the mind, and that's why it is partly real and partly unreal. But when this I am does not identifies with the body, then it becomes the door and the way to liberate ourselves from the clutches of ego and all mental, emotional conditioning. That's why Nisargadatta Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, one of the most famous Gyanis of non-duality, said that to all those asked his advice to focus on this sense I am without identifying this I am with the body. And when we when we are aware of this I am, then we can get access to the silence, to get in conscious touch or contact with the silence space of consciousness, of pure consciousness. We could say that this I am is consciousness polluted with a sattvic part of the mind, although sattva is pure light as well in the realm of matter and energy. So sattva is the vehicle through which consciousness can express clearly and fully itself in this realm of matter and energy. This I amness or I exist, it is our individual self, we could say, because it consists of the reflected consciousness of the mind and the sattvic part of the mind. And the source of this I amness is pure consciousness, which is this ever-present background of silent, peaceful, whole, and free space of consciousness. When we are aware of this I amness, or the sense I exist, or I am, then we are self-aware. And this is, as I said, the way and the door to connect with the pure consciousness, the silent space of consciousness, without any sense of I am, which is beyond the I am. So we have pure consciousness, I amness, and I amness identified with body. So this body, I am. This is the state of delusion, of ignorance. And to stop identifying with the body and the mind, all structures of the mind, we must connect with this I amness and with the silent space of consciousness, of pure consciousness. And this is self-awareness in the fullest meaning. Of course, we can use self-awareness in relation to psychological structures. We can say I'm self-aware when I am aware of the thoughts and feelings and emotions. But since we are not the emotions, since we are not the thoughts, saying I'm self-aware or refer to this as self-awareness, it's not quite correct. Because by saying self-awareness, the awareness of thoughts, means that I am the thoughts. But am I the thoughts? And if am I the thoughts, which one? And when these thoughts disappear, we could say, I am the thought, I am. And when these thoughts disappear, who am I? Maintaining awareness of this I amness, which is not identified with the body, and by maintaining awareness of the silent space within, we can little by little stop identify with the psychological structures, which until now we may take as ourselves, while in reality they are only programming, conditioning, automatic reactions. All these thoughts that appear in our mind mostly are created by the programming in the form of desire, attachment, greed, and all the varieties of tendencies in the form of anger, fear, pride, jealousy. But the central psychological element is desire. And all other tendencies and programming is related to desire. Identification with the body and desire for pleasure, for sensory pleasures, multiplies and create all other tendencies. So, self-awareness is important because without being self-aware, that means aware of this I amness and the silent space of consciousness, which is the ever-present background of all our experiences, we cannot stop identifying with the body, mind, thoughts, emotions, etc. And without stopping identifying with these elements, psychological elements, we cannot liberate or we cannot purify and liberate our subconscious mind from all these elements. First step is stop identifying with them. Second step is to illuminate them and realize that they are unconscious constructions that, based on ignorance and projection and identification and desire and fear and anger and pride, all, of course, the central element is desire, but then together with desire, other important elements that create all these kind of tendencies in us are related or are based on fear, anger, pride, greed, attachment. So we must stop identifying with all psychological structures and then illuminate them, investigate them, and see that they are only illusory formations that created by an unconscious way of living based on fantasy, projection, lack of discrimination, of discernment, and the rajas and tamas gunas. Rajas is the quality or gunas that makes the mind extroverted and attached to the external reality and seek happiness and pleasure through the sensory experiences. And tamas is the quality of darkness and ignorance and inertia as well, that prevents us from realizing our true nature. It creates it operates like a veil that prevents us from realizing our true nature, this silent space of consciousness, and makes identify ourselves with the body vehicle. And we think that we are a body, me entity, which has a mind to think, to feel, to perceive, to decide, and to get pleasure or pain and pain. So these rajas and tamas qualities, when operate through our mind, when increase in our mind and pollute, we can say, our mind, because mind by in itself is, the nature of mind is sattvic. But through the contact of mind with the sensory reality, impressions, it becomes polluted by the rajas and tamas qualities. And these qualities, we can say, limit our mind and make the mind dysfunction and inharmonious create disharmony, dysfunction in the mind, and diseases in the mind. We lose contact with our true self, our divine essence, identifying ourselves with the body, mind, vehicles, and we live and also develop in us all these kind of what we call awake tendencies, and we live under the dominion of these tendencies and programming in general related to the society and all kind of information that enters in our mind and psyche. So the way to liberate ourselves of any kind of programming conditioning is to stop identify with this conditioning and programming. And in order to achieve this, we must connect with this silent space of consciousness, which is always unaffected and detached, naturally detached from all these psychological formations. And this is self-awareness. And the purpose of meditation is to dedicate time, especially to, for example, to do practice 1 or 2 hours in the morning and in the evening, to dedicate this time to connect most profoundly and steadily with this silent space of consciousness. And this will make us more capable to maintain this distance, or that we call detachment from the psychological structures. We need to practice in favorable conditions so that to establish or to make this connection with the silent space of consciousness steady, and this will enable us to stop identifying with these psychological structures, and we can observe them objectively. This is another part of the inner work, to observe all psychological structures, to become aware of them, to recognize them, and to observe them without judging or resisting them, in order to understand them in depth and realize their futility and their limitation, and that they are not us, this structure, to realize that we are not these structures, that they function automatically, mechanically, without our volition, that limit our experience, and most of all, they prevent us from experiencing the fullness, the peace, and the bliss of our eternal, immortal soul. The moment we realize that we are not them, the moment we realize that our thoughts is only in a false, most of all of the time, false interpretation of what really happens, the moment we realize that they limit us and create us suffering, and most of all prevent us, these psychological structures, thoughts, emotions, etc., prevent us from experiencing here and now, and every here and now plenitude, peace and bliss and freedom, then naturally arises in us this will, and we could say desire, but a very special desire, to free ourselves, or more precisely, to free our psyche from these limitations, from this programming and patterns, which are based on desire. So self-awareness means I am aware of this I amness without identifying this I amness with the body, and aware of this silent space of consciousness, which is beyond I amness. this silent space is transparent, diaphanous, and unattached, and not affected by anything that happens in the realm of forms. Nothing can disturb the peace and the bliss of the divine essence or consciousness. Although our mind and heart can be agitated, consciousness is always serene, peaceful, empty space, unaffected by anything. That's why this is our refuge. Because without this refuge, we could not free ourselves from the conditioning. Connecting consciously with this silent space of consciousness is the way to liberation. Is the only way to liberation. Only conscious connection and stabilizing firm connection with this, in this silent space of consciousness, can enable us stop identifying with the conditioning, observe it objectively, inquire in all this stuff, and get, according to my experience, to get to these realizations. That is, that they are automatic, mechanical. They are not our choice. They harm us somehow. They create all kinds of problems we have in life, that they limit us, and that they are not us. They are not our choices. Realize this. And most of all, that they prevent us to experience our true self, to experience the peace, bliss, plenitude, and freedom we are here and now and always. This is self-awareness. So self-awareness is a means to stop identifying ourselves with the body and all psychological structures and external objects, persons, and situations, and is the final goal. The final goal means that the goal is to establish ourselves in the consciousness as consciousness. And this happens naturally when the mind, the egoic mind, dissolves, when the egoic tendencies, the ego itself, dissolves totally forever. When there is no ego, then the mind rests naturally in its source, because consciousness is the source of the mind. And what causes the mind to become extroverted are the rajas and tamas gunas and all kinds of tendencies based on desire. Desire can function when our mind is extroverted, because when our mind is rests in its source, in consciousness, when there is no any other entity or form or structure, there is nothing to desire. And because this consciousness, it is whole and full, there is no question of desiring anything else. So desire develops due to extroversion of the mind and connection of the mind with the sensory objects, and to return in our home, part of the process is to stop identifying and attach to the external forms, because all the psychological forms are created due to the identification and attachment to the external forms, and more precisely to the sensations and the pleasure we experience because of this contact of the mind with the external objects. And because there is an element in us called lust. And this lust has as original cause lust for sexual pleasure. So lust for sensory experiences and pleasures is the main cause that the mind becomes extroverted and attaches to the external reality and to the body as well. Then if we want to live a life free of pain and misery, we must stop, identify and attach ourselves to the external objects, the body and the mind, mental, emotional structures, and the ego itself. And in order to achieve this, we must become self-aware. That means aware of our true self, the space, the silent space of consciousness, which is always detached, naturally detached beyond all kinds of forms, time, space, and causality. Nothing can affect, destroy, harm the consciousness. And by attaching our mind to consciousness, our mind little by little acquires the quality of consciousness. Because the mind has a great capacity to adapt itself to what is focused on. That's why our intimate relations are very important. They affect our mind and heart drastically, greatly. So we must be very careful. The people we maintain very close relation. If we want to if we want to free ourselves from any from lower vibration, conditioning, programming, etc. That's why relation with enlightened beings is very important in the spiritual life and spiritual development, because when we are in the presence of these illuminated beings, their vibration permeate our field of energy, our mind and heart, and transform our mind and heart to our mind, heart, and energy field acquire the vibration of the enlightened beings. Similarly, if we are a lot of time with people with a very low vibrational frequency, this vibrational frequency permeates us and make us low our vibrational frequency. So the whole process is to elevate our frequency. That means also to eliminate all kind of energy, all kind of low frequency energies in us, which mostly are all kind of egoic tendencies. They have very low vibrational frequency. And to increase gradually as much as we can, every day, every moment, the higher or the sattvic vibrational frequency. So there are two main aspects of spiritual life and practice. One is to stop identifying with everything else than our true self. That means this I amness and most of all this silent space of consciousness. And the second aspect of life is to transform our vibrational frequency by various means, which includes the elimination of egoic tendencies, conditioning, patterns, programming, and increase the sattvic vibration, the luminous vibration, by various means. And these two aspects of spirituality to connect consciously with our true self or consciousness, the silent space of consciousness, and stop identifying with any other element. And attached to it is the one, and the other is to transform our vibrational frequency, go together. Because the more our mind, heart, and energy field vibrate in sattva, the easier it becomes to connect with the inner self and the silent space of consciousness, and the easier it becomes to experience peace, plenitude, bliss, and freedom. And the most we experience these divine qualities, and the more the deeper we get in this silence, and the steadier becomes this contact, the easier becomes this transformation of the mind, heart, and energy field. There are two processes that go together until the last moment that the ego dissolves totally and forever. The mind becomes pure like consciousness itself and rests effortlessly and without interruption in the consciousness as consciousness, and we live as consciousness itself. That's why all sages, and especially all traditional teachings on India, say the sage is Brahman itself. It is not more an individual, because all egoic tendencies and the egoic element, the ego, it has dissolved, and the consciousness expresses fully itself through this vehicle we call man, human being. Ramana Maharshi said this, I think. The mind of a sage is Brahman itself. The mind of a sage is Brahman itself. A sage is an incarnation of God in this dimension. And they can transform the life on the planet in this dimension. The presence of a being like Jesus Christ, or like Krishna, like Harakam Babaji, can transform this dimension. I mean, transform the hearts and the minds of human beings. To finish this presentation, self-awareness has to do with our true self, with our real self, which is consciousness itself, pure consciousness, formless, spaceless, timeless, causeless, which is the ever-present silent background of all our experiences, and which is unattached, unaffected of what happens in our psychological world, in the external world. To be aware of this silent space of consciousness is self-awareness. To be aware of this sense I am or I amness, I exist, it is self-awareness. And this I amness is the door to get in the silent space of consciousness. And because of this reflection of consciousness on the mind becomes able to perceive, or better, more precise, consciousness perceives through the mind. In the same way that the sun reflects on the moon, and the moon, it appears that luminous, and that has its own light. But this is only an illusion. What we call attention is only the reflection of consciousness of the mind. When consciousness operates through the mind and becomes aware of something, then this is what we call attention. So awareness and self-awareness, awareness of something. Self-awareness is this subjective, we call it experience, but it's not a dual experience. It's this subjective experience of consciousness itself. Self-awareness is important because it's the only way to detach ourselves from what we are not, and the only way to experience the peace, the bliss, and the plenitude we are. And self-awareness in reality is close to what we call meditation. What's the difference between meditation and self-awareness? The difference is that in meditation, when we really do meditation, our mind and attention are completely absorbed in this silent space of consciousness. We lose vision of the world and the psychological world. This is profound meditation. But self-awareness is the same, but part of the attention operates, and so we are in contact with the forms. We see forms. We see things. We hear sounds. But we are mostly, if we have this capacity, of course, in the silence space of consciousness within, in this inner silence. In this case, we are in the state we call self-awareness. We are self-aware. We are aware of the silent space of consciousness, but at the same time, we are aware of external objects or psychological forms. That's why it is self-awareness and not meditation. In reality, it is a meditative state, because meditation means that we are in conscious contact with our inner self, the silent space of consciousness. And also self-awareness means that I'm aware of this silent space of consciousness. The difference is that in meditation, we are, if we do really meditation, if we really are in this state of meditation, we are profoundly absorbed in this peace and bliss and plenitude of the silent space of consciousness. And self-awareness means that we are connected and we experience sense of peace and plenitude, but part of the attention is outwards, so that we can experience sensory forms and psychological forms. How much we can do this depends on our maturity, purity of mind, practice, capacities, devotion. How much we want to experience peace and how much we want to experience pleasure. And how much we resist what happens in here and now, and how much we can accept. We are capable to accept what happens here and now, in the present moment. This capacity develops according to our practice. If we practice with steadiness, determination, perseverance, devotion, faith, then we, lead by lead, increase the capacity to remain in conscious contact with the peace and the bliss of the self. And we become more and more capable to stop identifying with the external reality and psychological reality, illusion reality, and to detach ourselves when we identify, because it is a dynamic process. So it becomes easier to us not to identify, and when we find ourselves identified with something, to stop identifying with this. And also progress means to have the capacity more frequently, more firmly, and more deep and deeper to experience the peace and bliss of the self. Self means here the consciousness, not the ego, not the egoic self, not the apparent or illusory self, body, mind, me. So self-awareness is the means and the goal, and the final goal of spirituality and human life in general. It is to return to our original home. I wish you to realize that you are this consciousness, this light of consciousness, and experience more and more peace, love, and light, and become a being of peace, love, and light. Namaste.